Thank you, Chien. We talk about priestly covenant. So when God and Aaron, God make Aaron and his descendant to be priests forever. That is a covenant. It's not just a promise, but it's a covenant. So from now on, it doesn't matter Aaron's children or grandchildren going to be good or bad. They become priests forever. And all the priests in the future will come from, they call Aaronic priesthood, because this is the covenant God made with him. Now go back to the time of Moses. When God called Moses, think about that. If Moses never denied or what God going to use him to do with him, maybe all the children of Moses going to be priests forever, not Aaron. But Moses did not want that. So Aaron's children going to be selected as the priest forever with that covenant. But you know that if you look back in Israel history, Moses' children tried to be priests too. The Israel history say that Moses' children or grandchildren became the priests of the Dan tribe for many generations. But the Dan tribe is another, you might say, outlaw group. They're not really join with the Israelite most of the time. And it's very interesting about the Dan tribe is in the book of Revelation, when they call about the 12 tribes of Israel, Dan is not in the list. And in the time of when they take census, after Solomon time, when they take many census after that, Dan tribe is not in the census. That tribe is not in the list. So that's very interesting. When the Bible in Revelation say that God called the 12 tribes of Israel, you count all the tribes. Joseph children have to try, and they add Levi into. So it's supposed to be 13, but you keep counting them, there are 12, and you check the list, then try disappear from the list. So it's very interesting. We still not know why. Now we talk about David's children. This is another covenant. You remember the Bible said that David descendant going to be king forever. So this is another promise, a covenant. And people say, how could that be? But now when Jesus come to be born at David descendant, now we can understand that David descendant going to be king forever. That means through Jesus. And the covenant is true forever and ever. That David covenant God made with David. Now, when we look at a Christian, from the Christian perspective and from the Jewish perspective, it's a little bit different. David is to have a child. And that child going to be a son. Now, David had many children, many sons, but just one son that going to be selected through the line of Solomon. And we think that who is from that line going to be king forever? If you look at from David to Solomon and go on until Israel was destroyed. And they stopped having king for a long time. For hundreds of years, no king. When the Israel was destroyed, the Judea was destroyed and bring to Babylon. And when they come back, when the Jew came back to Palestine, to Israel, around AD 500, they don't have any more king because they're under the rule of Persia. But we know that there's some descendant of David there. And until the time of Jesus, 500 years after the last king of Israel, Israel don't have any king, even in Jesus' time. We call King Herod. Herod is not the Jew. Herod's family is Bedouin. Bedouin is the Palestinian who lived in the land for a long time. But Herod married to one of David's descendants and claimed himself to be king of the Jews. But we know that he is not king. He just bought the right to rule over part of Judea from the Roman. So that is not from David's line, but we know that Jesus is going to fulfill that promise or that covenant. Now, how Christians look about the covenant, the new covenant. We look from the book of Jeremiah. When we talk about the Messianic age, the time of Jesus that come to rule the world. Now, from Christian perspective, when Jesus had the Last Supper with his disciples, we believe that that's the beginning of the new covenant between believer and Jesus. Jesus said that if you take this bread and wine, you take my life into you, and I make a covenant with you. On that Last Supper that Jesus had with his disciples, that is the new beginning of the new covenant. That Christians claim all the time. When we take the Lord's Supper, we always say that the new covenant starts between God and mankind. And when Christians have the Lord's Supper, every time we renew that covenant, to remember that covenant that Jesus made with us through the blood of Christ, that's the new covenant. Now, for Christians, this is another thing that we talk about new covenant and the word testament. Why Christians use the word testament today instead of covenant? Well, the idea comes from the death of Jesus. And it's like a will. When somebody dead, and the will in the old Latin word or the old English word use the word testament. You remember that when they read the will, they will say the last testament. So it's like we inherited something from Jesus, from that will. That's why we call the New Testament. It just means that for Christians, it means that because of the sacrifice of Jesus and what he left for us is the testament. That's why Christians call New Testament instead of New Covenant. So the word testament or the will is the word that New English or the Latin used, but the idea it comes from the last testament or will of the person who died and give to their descendant. That's why Christians use this word instead of covenant from that day on. Now come from the full Christian perspective of covenant. We talk about the covenant of redemption. This is the covenant that God gives to mankind. It not just start in time of Jesus, but as I say that it start in the book of Genesis chapter 3, that God intend to help man and to redeem us. But it kept go on and go on until the end of the book of Revelation. It come back to tell us that God loved humankind and will do everything to save us. The covenant of sign and seal. Now for Christian, modern day Christian, the sign of covenant is the baptism and the Lord's Supper. That is the two signs that we use today, that we have with God. That's why Christians use the water baptism and the Lord's Supper or the Eucharist to remember the covenant that we have with God, to remind us all the time. That only two things. The Lord's Supper is the most important part because it reminds us about the sacrifice of Jesus and the beginning of the covenant that we have with God. And the idea of Jesus died for us to make that covenant. And we use the word substitution. It means that someone come to replace us. We're supposed to die, but Jesus come to be a substitute, to die for us. And baptism is another sign of we die in the old life and born again in the new life. So this is another sign of covenant that we have with God. You see, compared to the Jew have circumcision. Or the Jew, we have the male, we have circumcision as a symbol of new covenant with God. This is the old covenant. But Christians use baptism as a sign of new covenant with Jesus. Now, can we break the covenant? Well, the Bible says no. The covenant never be broken because it starts from God's perspective, and God never break, God keep it. So it will last forever. So this is why God still have mercy on the Jew, because he have the covenant that cannot be broken. Even the people try to break the covenant, to run away from God. Well, that is one side. It never happened because God will keep his covenant forever. Even the people don't keep it, God still keep it. It still function. We can refuse God too. Well, in some degree. We try to ignore the covenant. We try to say no when God calls us back, like the Israelites try for generation after generation. They can try. They can try to forget. They try to live a different life, but still God will remind them the covenant is still there. They can reject God, but God won't break the covenant. Why? Because the covenant does not depend on earth. It depends on God who make it. And you know that God who make it very faithful, sincere, and forever. So this is why when God have a covenant with us, we can trust on it forever. And it answers a lot of questions that, like for the Jew, can they run away from God? No. They're always people of God. How about Christian? If you're born again to be part of Jesus Christ, can you run away and lose that part? No, because it not depends on us. It depends on Jesus, who are faithful and will keep his covenant forever too. It's not about us, it's about Jesus. God does not forget his people, and he does not forget his covenant. So this is something is about God, his personality, his attribute. This is God. And God will never forget his covenant with the one that he made. So the Jew, the descendant of Abraham under the old covenant, and all Christians under the new covenant through the blood of Jesus Christ. It's not about us, it's about Jesus and his sacrifice. And we who accept that offer become part of the covenant forever too. God restore us today. Well, we can go through a lot of things in our life, but if you're only part of the covenant, you're born again in that covenant, you're going to be there forever. You will never lose it. He will restore us. The send is mean that he will give back to us whatever he promised. What we lose, we get back all. Like the Israelites will get back to God one day, all of them. And all the born again believer will always come back to Jesus one day. Jesus Christ is the solution. What that means? It means that it starts for the new generation and for all the new covenant. All people all over the world will come back to God through Jesus, the only way. No other way. Because this is the only way that God accepts, and Jesus is the hope of the world. Anyone who accepts Jesus will get into that covenant and back to be the people of God. And they go back to when God made humankind, Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. He loved us and he made us in his own image for a purpose. Even some of us run away from him, but a lot of us will come back to him and be with him forever. So this is by the grace of God, because he made us in his own image. It's not about us, it's about him. It's about God. So this chapter that we learned today is about God who by himself to us, God who loves us and do everything to save us. So it's so different from last week. We talked about angel, bad angel. They are created by God too, but God make angel to be his servant. God make man to be his children. So they're so different. Angels don't have second chance to come back to God. When they make mistake, it's done. But man will always have a second chance because God loves us and make us to be his children. So that's why God saved us. And God did not make covenant with angel, but God made it with man. And that is something to tell us this is something special about humankind, about us. Okay, I just go all over in general. You can go back and read the note in detail. And if you have questions, we can talk more about it. Okay, how you think, what your reflection about the chapter? So in short, the covenant is made by God to mankind. It cannot be broken. It lasts forever. It not depends on earth. It depends on God. We are not the one who make it. God make it, and he keep it. So that's a good news. If it depends on earth, we lost it long time ago. If it's just an agreement or contract, we broke it all the time. But this is not a contract. It's a covenant of love. And it lasts forever for us to come back to God. Okay, your question of reflection for the chapter of today.
Yes, Covenant and สัญญาสาบานใครหรือ little confusing about that
Okay, the main difference with about all many words that we use, it just sum up to be something we make amongst our friends, something we make between two parties. But the covenant is special reserved for God. God make with man. That we use the word covenant. We cannot use the word covenant with other men because in general, we cannot do that because we are not God. When we say the word covenant, it means that it's one side promise. It doesn't matter that side keep it or not, we will keep it. And when we make a covenant, mean that we're going to give, we're going to love, we're going to sacrifice to that side, no matter what. I think human can do that, only the parent to do that to their children. But I know that some couple, some wife and husband can do that too, but very rare. This is why we divorce all the time. Because one side don't keep their promise, so divorce. But the wife or one side who sacrifice and tolerate another side who not faithful, not keep the promise, maybe that is a covenant. You know, you remember that when you get married, a lot of time the preacher say you make a covenant. When the preacher use that verse, it means that cannot be broken. It's forever. But most couple cannot do that. It's not a covenant. It's just a contract. You love me, I love you. You don't love me, I don't love you. You're faithful to me, I'm faithful to you. If you don't faithful to me, we're done. This is normal in most couple. Very rare that any couple can make a covenant, mean that I love you for whatever. You're not faithful, you're bad, you treat me not well, I still love you and faithful to you. It rarely happens between men or human being. So we use the word covenant just to be sure that it's one side love, it's one side sacrifice, one side promise.
Covenant that mean I can die for you
Yeah, if you can die for your wife, you can say that I make a covenant with you, honey. If not, just use the word contract. But I believe you as a parent, most of you can say that to your children. I make a covenant with you.
So Achan, a vow and a contract, are they the same value?
Yeah, the Bible used when we make a vow to God or we make an oath to God, we can use that. But you see, we don't use the word covenant because only God can use that word because God started and God can keep it. Now, how about the vow and oath? Sometimes we can keep it, sometimes we cannot. But when you make a vow, you make an oath, mean that you try your best. And you're ready to pay the consequence when you break the vow or you break an oath. You're going to pay for the consequence. In the Old Testament, you see many situations when people make a vow to God and cannot keep it. They have to pay the price. For example, they make a vow to give a lamb to God and one day they cannot do it, they have to pay double or triple for that vow.
I just have one question, but it's out of subject.
Okay.
Why do we know that Israel is the promise of God to Abraham?
Yes.
But why do Palestinians people always say that the land belongs to them? From what century?
Okay, you need to go back to history to know first who is the Palestinian. Before that, Abraham go to live in that land they call Palestine. Now you see that the native people lived there even before Abraham went there. There are so many nations lived there in Palestine. In the time of Abraham, they call Canaan. The Canaanite lived there. When Abraham traveled around there, that area is called Canaan. Now, when Abraham lived among themselves, and later on Jacob went to Egypt and lived there for 430 years. When Moses bring the Israelites out, that land still called Canaanite. Canaan. It's a mixture of at least 10 nations, 10 tribes of people live there. And the Jews start killing them off and live there, take all over the land. Now, the Jews lived there for maybe 1,000 more years until Jesus' time. When the Romans come to destroy Judea in AD 70, the Jews fight back, and the Romans take 2-3 years to eradicate, kill all the Jews, destroy Jerusalem, burn down everything. The Romans do more than just kill the Jew. They take the leftover of the Jew to be slave all over Roman Empire. And the Roman import all the Arab from around that area to live in Judea. And the Roman changed the name of Judea to be Palestine. So the map of the world don't call that area Judea anymore, but call Palestine since the time of Roman. And the mixture of people, some Jews who live there mixed with all the Arab. So they have some Jewish blood, but a lot of Arab blood in there. And they lived there 2,000 years until 1948, after World War II. The United Nations allowed Israel to move back to Palestine and give a small piece of land to the Jews. So, but the Arab, especially all the ones who call themselves Palestine, lived there for 2,000 years, don't like it. So they try to make war with the Jews all the time. The Jews fight back and take more land from them. And now the Jews call them terrorists, but they call themselves Palestinian because they're the native who live there. So now I answer your question, that's why, okay. So it's politics get involved. So who own the land? It's difficult to say because many generations of people, thousands of years back and forth, back and forth. But the Jews claim that God gave them the land.
Ajahn, I have a question
Yes.
regarding to the word covenant or vow.
Yes.
Actually, vow. When we break the vow or earlier you mentioned about consequence. So what is the difference between consequence and punishment?
Well, it's similar in the sense that when we broke a vow or an oath, we have to pay back, or the consequence mean that you either pay the fine or God punish you. So the consequence still can be positive or negative. It depends on how you deal with it. When you break a vow, the first consequence is you pay the fine 2-3 times of your vow, or God punish you. Which one you want? And both are consequence of your breaking the vow or breaking the oath.
So just like the consequence, just like when you pay the fine, and the punishment, when you not pay the fine, then you go to jail, right?
Yes. So the consequence can be either way. You have a choice to choose.
Okay. Thank you.
Welcome. So any more question or reflection or comment on the topic? So this is the foundation of a lot of things that you're going to build on top. When we talk about the covenant of God in our life, it's going to answer a lot more questions in the future about many things. Why I say it's a foundation? Because when God make a covenant with us, it depends on God. It not depend on us. And it will answer another more question like salvation, blessing, gift, new life. It's all based on this foundation of the covenant of God. Anything have to build on this. And it answers a lot of questions about how we save. Can we lose our salvation? Why God bless us? It's all come back to this covenant. So a lot of time we argue about something on the top like the fruit, but we always have to go back to the root, the foundation, that every fruit or everything built on top, where it comes from. And this is something that a lot of time people argue about something without knowing the foundation, the fact, where those things come from. Now you see my point, why I say that all this covenant is the foundation of a lot of things in the future that we got to learn to build on top. So any other thing that you have before we done for this topic for today? Let's see, I think somebody already left the group. Is that Bun who already left the group? Or Bun still here? So who is the one who left the group?
Farm.
Oh, Farm. Okay.
Yeah, we join together.
Cũng chơi.
Okay.
FC.
Okay, good. Okay, if you don't have anything else, we're going to be done for this topic for today. And we're going to take a break and